and welcome to Between the Lines. This is the episodic comedy panel hosted by the Writers Guild Foundation in partnership with Final Draft and Variety. But the real source of comedy is going to be me trying to maintain a normal shape against this background. For those who don't know me, I'm Lauren O'Connor. I am a librarian at the Writers Guild Foundation, and I will be your MC. And today we'll be talking to the 2022 Writers Guild Award nominees for episodic comedy, as well as viewing the scripts that earned them the nomination. Before I introduce this awesome group of panelists, let's take a look at this really fun awards clip montage of the scenes we'll be discussing. All right, giving you guys, now's the time, panelists, if you wanna turn on your video and unmute yourself. I'm giving everyone a huge virtual round of applause. The clip reel is awesome. So let's get some introductions going and meet the writers of those clips we just saw. And since this is a celebration of TV writing, I think a fun way to do this is when I call your name, tell us one thing you've watched on TV in your life that's inspired you, and tell us one thing. We'll keep it brief here. Tell us one thing about your writing habits and your writing routine. And we're gonna start with All Sales Final, the Superstore finale, the writers of that, Jonathan Green, Gabe Miller, and Justin Spitzer. You guys can go in that order.
All right. I'm Jonathan Green. One thing that has inspired me, I mean, besides everything that Steve Martin's ever done, I feel like I'm not allowed to say that, is Freaks and Geeks was a big show for me, as far, in terms of combining great comedy with characters that you really cared about and your great emotional moments. I like that blend. And then as far as a writing habit to share, Gabe and I are partners, and I guess I can share that we learned a long time ago that it doesn't work for the two of us to sit together and try to write at the same computer. And it has helped us very much over the years to be able to split stuff up and then come back together to rewrite, because, you know, that old thing of it's much easier to rewrite than to face the blank page. So.
Very good. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks.
Oh.
Hey, I'm Gabe Miller. One thing that inspired me early on was the show Police Squad, just in terms of sheer all-out comedy. Zucker Brothers, and they used to watch it with my dad, and that was a good memory. I don't know. We're a team, so that was the writing tip. I'll be partnered in with that one. So it's covered. Thank you so much.
Cool, thanks, Gabe.
Justin Spitzer, also at Superstore. I'd say maybe the thing that inspired me most was an episode of the BBC Office. I remember coming out here and I was just trying to be a writer, and it felt like, oh God, everything's been done. And then one night I just happened to discover it, and it was like felt totally new and fresh and gutsy. And it's like, no, there's great ideas, great things out there remaining still to be done. And it just felt really different. And one thing about my writing, I almost never write a scene start to end. It's too hard to shape. I'll just open up a Word document and start writing random bits that I know, and then add something before, something after it, and then eventually shape it.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. So next, let's talk to the co-writer of fucking Rez Dogs, the pilot for Reservation Dogs, Sterlin Harjo.
Hi, thanks for having me. I also, and I'm not copying, but I was the British Office. I mean, it's something I watch once a year, and I remember watching it when it first came out, and I was like, I want to do a show that has native indigenous humor in it, and it's a very specific humor, and I didn't know how do you introduce an audience to that. And I just remember being struck by, I didn't know the accents, I didn't know all the slang and the nuance of living in England, but like they drop you in it, and it's relentless, and you have to just catch up. And the writing's so good that you really lean in because of that. And I thought about that a lot whenever I was writing Reservation Dogs. We're in a time right now where we have to I'm running a writer's room, finishing this week actually for season 2. And people complain about the Zoom writer's room a lot, but I really like it. Like, but I think the key is that you only go for a few hours, like you can't go all day, and you just have specific tasks, and you don't have people wandering halls, like you're stuck here looking at each other, and you have a small amount of time to get something done. And I think that's the key. So yeah, that's what.
And it works for you. I like it. Thanks, Sterlin.
Yeah.
All right. So next, we'll talk to the co-writers of episode 1, True Crime, from Only Murders in the Building, Steve Martin and John Hoffman.
Steve, take it away.
I'd say my early influences were the Romantic poets, Byron, Keats, and Shelley, and I think you see that in my work. It's pretty plain. But the truth is, I loved comedy as a kid. I didn't understand it. I loved Laurel and Hardy, and now I look back on it and I think, oh, that was writing. That was writing and performance blending perfectly. So I think we all know that this is a learning experience every time, no matter whether you're young or like the other guys and women. I'm joking. So I can't remember the second part of the question, but I'll pass it over to John.
Got it. Thanks, Steve. Welcome.
Yes, I think the only thing I can think of, there's so many to be inspired by, but I wrote, and we all wrote during this crazy time last year, during this pandemic, and I was very soothed by every episode, all 7 seasons of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. I watched it religiously every night before going to sleep while writing Only Murders in the Building. And it was the biggest balm for soothing me down at the end of the day, but also really insightful into human comedy and painting with nice broad strokes, but I cared about everybody, and that began to feel very nice. And the only other thing, I've said this to other writers, that the thing that has helped me is that when I wake up, I don't get out of bed for 10 to 20 minutes. And I just think on nothing. And then usually a story problem that has been coming from the day before enters in. And somehow that seems to be the most productive creative thinking time. So don't get out of bed for 10 or 20 minutes is my advice.
Love that. Thanks, John. So next, let's talk to Lee Sung Jin, the writer of Enlightened Dave, or the co-writer of Enlightened Dave from Dave.
Yes, thank you. Something that inspires me. I watch The Sopranos like way too much. It's a little bit of a cliche answer, but every time I watch it, it just gets funnier to me. I think it's the funniest show of all time. And I have the Soprano sessions right here in the office. Writing tip, I guess I find that actually like moving where you sit every couple hours really helps. I just feel like I'm just like constantly sitting in different areas of whatever building I'm in and hoping and praying that something changes. And it usually takes about 25 different chairs, but eventually a scene gets done.
Very good. Thanks, Sunny. So next we'll talk to Tony McNamara, who wrote the episode Alone at Last from his show The Great. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. I guess inspired, I didn't know I was being inspired. I was just had this thing in Australia. MASH was on at 4:00 in the afternoon. So it was great after the horrors of high school to go see how funny the Korean War was. So I would watch that all the time. And later on, I now realized that was very inspiring to me because it was so funny. They did bloodshed. They did horrible things. It was a really emotional show as well as a really funny show. So that's a show I always think about and go back and watch a lot. And habit, I guess I write the whole script by hand first for some reason. But I think because I'm scared of a blank computer screen, it's too much for me. Whereas if it's on paper, I'm a bit like, I'm not really doing anything. No one will ever see this. But if I put it on a screen, it feels like something might happen later.
It's a good tip. Thanks, Tony. All right, so last but not least, we have Saladin K. Patterson, the writer of the pilot for The Wonder Years. Welcome, Saladin.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with everyone. In terms of something that has inspired me that I've seen on TV, I think I have to go all the way back to the Andy Griffith Show. That's my favorite sitcom of all time. And I remember being so impressed early on that, here I was, a young black male in my late teens and 20s, watching a rerun for the 20th time about Opie finding a baby bird. And that's pretty much all that happened in the episode. But I was engrossed and teared up at the end like I always did. And just, realizing the power of that storytelling when it rings true to, characters and, just what they were able to do with being grounded but still being funny is something that has always inspired me, that I've always tried to hopefully get to the point one day to where I can emulate something that resonates that way. In terms of a writing tip or technique that I have discovered, as I have grown as a writer to, like I said, almost get to the point of writing what I know, writing based on personal experiences, as I've come to be able to wrap my head around and deal with things that I can translate to the page. I use real names. I use real names of friends and family members because that just helps me channel it. And I found that helps me get past my defenses that keep me from going uncomfortable places. I also discovered that when you don't change those names and you turn your script into Disney, you get a long letter from legal about how every name that you've used has to change. And you start to really throw off a lot of people who have been used to casting directors and things like that, really get upset when you have to change every name in your script because you were too lazy to do it on time.
Very good. Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us tonight. I think since we have kind of a lot of ground to cover, it's best to just kind of dive into the scripts. So for the discussion, I thought it would kind of give it the best flow if we discussed the 3 pilot scripts first, and then our 2 regular episodes, and then kind of close it out with the 1 series finale script. So the order for everyone will be Only Murders in the Building, Reservation Dogs, The Wonder Years, Dave the Great, and then Superstore. So first up, let's start with Only Murders in the Building. Steve and John. Oh, cool. We got the script pages right there.
Look at that.
So I actually, this is a question kind of unrelated to what we're looking at right now. But what I wanted to start with is there's such a wonderful, sweet, engaging trio at the heart of this show, obviously, in Charles and Oliver and Mabel. And I just wanted to know how those characters sort of came to be and how they evolved through the pilot writing process.
Steve Martin, you should talk about the origin of this and these characters, because that's
I'm going to make this as brief as possible. First of all, I'm looking at the script page, and I am so impressed with the use of double hyphens and ellipses and caps and all caps. It's amazing. That really is writing. This idea came to me years ago. I don't want to say 5 because it might be 7, it might be 5. And I was at a party hosted by a great sort of Hollywood character named Sandy Gallen at his apartment. And there were 3 actors, older actors at this party. And he came over to me and he said, you know what? You ought to write something for them. First of all, I was flattered that he thought I could write, because as much as you've written, you always feel like it's a new thing every time and everyone hates you. And I thought, that's not a bad idea. 3 older people. And I've thought about it for several years, and I sort of came up with, I don't know why this title popped into my head, Only Murders in the Building, meaning that they live in this building, but they're older, so they're too tired really to go outside the building to look for crime. They like crime. And anyway, I just kind of wrote up a few characters. Then John came in and suggested this fabulous idea that they're doing a podcast. And then you start to meld and blend everything. And that's how it came about. And then you do a pitch. You know, you do a pitch, no matter where you are in the business, you're pitching. And as I was pitching it at a luncheon, I thought for the first time, you know, this is a bad idea. And then it just sort of one of those things, you know, some things are, when you develop them, they're halting, they're stumbling, there's blocks, there's all, but this just felt all the way. And when John came on board, everything became so much easier.
Awesome.
Yes, that's the answer to that one.
Cool. Well, and I was just wondering too, Saladin touched on this, but naming characters, I'm always really fascinated by that. So how did, you know, Charles Hayden Savage and Mabel Mora, and like, where did you guys get those names from?
This was a process, right, Steve? I mean,
well,
yes.
It is. Actually, we were going over every name because every character was written, and then Mabel came into it because it was originally written for 3 older people, and I thought it was a great suggestion, not to have a younger person, but to have Selena Gomez. She is so perfect for it, and not a cliche younger person. And but we went back and forth on. Like Marty was involved in the naming of his character, and Marty actually suggested the hyphenated name of Charles Hayden Savage. And I love names. Maybe you have the app Name Dice. Anybody have the app Name Dice? Well,
it's really.
I guess I'm talking to younger people. But look up the app Name Dice, and if you ever need a name, you can throw the name dice, and they come with, you know, Allison Ferguson, you know, and they all sound real. And by the way, the believability of a name is so important. If you have a fake name, it's a fake character, I believe. But John, you go, because by the way, I want to apologize. I'm on the East Coast. It's late and I have to step out early. I have to take my daughter to school in the morning and I have to work. So I'm going to bail out at a certain point, but don't be insulted or offended. Okay, go.
We
John.
forgive you. Oh.
Yeah.
No. But I will say, Name Dice, the app, the most entertaining thing about that for me was watching Marty and Steve play Name Dice, the app, because they would just get a new name up and it became like, I will never forget blah, blah, blah. And all of and they just riffed for like a half an hour on
I'm going to do it right now.
Oh,
you know who I was talking to the other day? Adrian Powers. And Adrian was, commenting about his experience with Abby Clark. But I was insulted because Danny Birch did not agree.
Got it. Name Dice.
I downloaded it.
Up the stock of that sucker.
All right.
Hi, everybody. You're downloading Name Dice.
All right. So since we have these script pages here, I think Kat is controlling the pages. If we could go up just a little bit before this scene. Yes, there we go. Where we get Charles and Oliver exchanging, ooh, she's good look as they head off, casual and not sneaky at all, as we end Act 1. And so I'm a script librarian and I just like look at TV formatting a lot. And this is a really unique way to do an act break in a TV script. So the one thing that I really wanted to ask you guys was how you kind of came up with doing it that way.
Oh, that's nice. Well, the truth is, honestly, I think these act breaks were just sort of like dropped in. I mean, when we are the writer's room and Steve and working on this pilot together, we certainly structured out each episode in acts for ourselves just mentally to understand the flow of an episode. But I I think in this case, where it became clear we had to write end act one in the actual script, it all had to do with Hulu. It was very pragmatic. It was very much like, for the people that, I don't know why, but they tell you you need to put 3 act breaks in. So you pick the most common moments and they go to like 1 second of black on the screen. And so you have to think of like, okay, when you're watching it, when you're feeling the flow, where's the best place for that awkward moment, truthfully. But in this case, it was just a very simple, pragmatic call on ending acts, but it made sense.
And also, I'd just like to add, as an actor, you know, it says Charles and Oliver exchange, ooh, she's good. That's writing. You know, it's like it informs the actor as much as a line does. And we played that. And because end of act one is in all caps and bold, we know it has just the slightest, tiniest bit more oomph than we might play if it was just in the middle of a scene.
Got it. So one more, another question I had just about the pilot in general, then I want to dig back into the script here. Did you guys have to kind of know what you were doing for the whole kind of first season before you wrote the pilot, since there's so much kind of embedded in there?
Yes, well, in large part, yes. And Steve and I talked about the flow of this first episode. The first episode certainly had to be developed right off the bat. But then within the pitch for the show, we were presenting this script and the pitch for the season of season 1. So there was a 3-act structure to the whole season that had to be sort of laid out. And so there was a general sense of what we were going to do, and certain things, if you've seen the whole season, are certainly teed up in this first episode. And then other things certainly came in development of the following 9. But yeah, it was because it was a mystery, it just required a lot more structure than I really understood before going in, truthfully. And I was like, wow, this is really, and so we ended up in the room, you know, really technically working backwards and having to figure out the very ending and then twist our way to the end.
Got it. Okay, so back to the pages here. Why did you choose this scene to share with us?
It felt like when the trio came together for the first time in a real way. You know, I think, as Steve was just saying, I think Selena is perfect in the mix. And I also think then when you make the show and you realize, oh, this show is going out into the world, it's the thing that either sort of like makes you go, how's that going to work? The 3 of those people together. And the show itself is, we put under a big tent thematically. One of the big tents was classic meets modern. And we thought the generational bridges that we could make between Selena and, or rather Mabel and Charles and Oliver, could be held together by this true crime story. All of it seemed to come together in this moment when they had all personal reasons to not be in touch with each other, and yet inextricably they are drawn together in a moment when they see this person who they all experienced a mere few seconds on an elevator with earlier that night. And that to me became what it ultimately hopefully is a show about connection in the face of loneliness.
Definitely. And so what I think makes the writing particularly great on this show is just like, you know, just kind of like the banter and the character voice and the specificity of character. And when you're writing this, can you talk about, or when you two were writing this pilot, can you talk about how what we're seeing here ended up on the page?
I go right to Steve, and Steve, this is you, because I look at this gift of a project that landed in my lap by Dan Fogelman and Jess Rosenthal, and this gift of an idea brought to me by Steve Martin and saying, yes, let's work together on this. The real gift ultimately was you have this body of work from 3 stars that is so vast, and the lexicon in my head of what makes all of them work was again a real head start in some way, but I think it comes from the personality and the elevated comedy that Steve Martin's been doing forever. And that, Steve, you please, if you know more about.
I just believe as a writer in the importance of the believability of the conjunction of the characters. You know, there's always the term meet cute, and I say you can't do a meet cute. You've got to do a truly believable event that would put in our case, 3 characters together, in this case, driven by their love of true crime. And this accidental meeting and going down the elevators and not even talking to each other, and then finding out they're in the same saloon where they would meet because their electricity went out. So it's all about the believability of that. And I love that first scene with Marty, me, and Selena, where it's this awkward getting to know you. And it's not even really shortcutted, because sometimes we as writers will go, let's get this over with. But I just believe so much in that element of truth, especially at the beginning, so you don't take somebody out of the story. I think that was English. I'm not sure, but go ahead.
I understood it.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, well.
You know what Ezra Gorman said? Ezra Gorman just loved what I
now
just
that
said.
everyone is using that app, I think thank you both so much for
I apologize for having to leave.
No, it's great.
I'm on a foreign coast. You don't even know how far away I am. But I'm just saying good night, and I appreciate all the writers, and it's an honor to join you here.
We appreciate you too. Thanks, Steve.
Good night.
Take care. So next, let's talk to Sterlin about the pilot for Reservation Dogs. There we go. Okay.
Not as good a formatting. It's okay. Yeah. You can say it.
It's a script. Okay. So we've heard you talk a little bit about working with Taika Waititi and his telling you he had a deal at FX and you sent him the idea for Reservation Dogs. Can you talk about writing this pilot and how this script evolved from that idea? Like how much writing, how many drafts?
Yeah, I took the idea. He gave me, we came over the idea. Taika made it happen. I went off and wrote it. And, emailed Taika a lot, and eventually we reconnected in his busy schedule. Mm-hmm. And, he did a pass of it. Yeah.
Got it.
We never wrote this script together. It was like I wrote it and then I would give it to him and he would give me a note pass, or he would do a pass, and then, we just sort of kept throwing it back and forth at each other. But this scene in particular, mm-hmm. which is when you first meet the spirit guide. I have some kids that are going to run in any minute yelling. When you meet the spirit guide of bears, it was a pivotal scene, and like I knew it was, and I didn't know necessarily why, but I have a comedy group called the 1491s, and the guy who plays the spirit is the guy who plays the spirit is in my comedy group, and we'd done this sort of version of this character a lot. And one of the things that we developed is one of the things that we realized is doing a live show is non-natives, white people in particular, are really afraid to laugh when it comes to native stuff. Like, it's like, there's a lot of guilt and shit, like weighing it all down, and no one's really sure how to react when you're being funny and you're native, because it's just too complex. And then you also deal with representation and the idea of what we are that has been perpetuated throughout history of cinema and TV. And so what we realized is we would do these shows and no one would laugh, or like if it was all, say, non-native audience, it was harder to get them to laugh. And we realized we needed to give people permission to laugh with us. And so this character, comes in the first act, and it was like, to me, it does a couple of things. It's like, brings non-natives into the joke and says, okay, you can laugh at this, because like if I were to ask almost 99% of the people in the world, like, draw me a picture of a Native American, they wouldn't draw me. They would draw that guy on the horse. And no Native American looks like that guy on the horse or dresses like that guy on the horse. So we had to kind of say, all right, this is the stereotype, and this, and there's some truth in that, because we used to dress like this and ride horses. And so here's the stereotype. Now, isn't it funny that you think that we're still like that? And we just showed you like 10 minutes of kids dressed in blue jeans and sneakers. Now, isn't it funny that that's what you think that we still look like? We can all laugh at that together. Now let's, now you kind of get our humor, and we can make fun of ourselves, and it's self-deprecating, and it's all of these things. And now let's all move on together and laugh together. Like I feel like that was the sort of, that's why that character's there.
Got it.
And I just felt like, it was like I could just feel viewers relaxing once it gets to that character, because it's like everything starts to kind of make sense. And like I said, we've done this character so much that I just had to write a framework. And I've worked with the actor a lot, so once I was directing it, it was really about letting him go. Like, I have the framework, which is the script, but we've worked through so much of this and done sketches and things together that I could really kind of wind them up and throw out ideas the whole time. And, and then you hear the crew laughing. And once you hear that, it's usually like, that's a good sign. I mean, they're all laughing. So
for sure. So Kat, we're on this page here. Can you just kind of scroll like elegantly and slowly down a little bit? Just so we can get a sense of
that is an elegant scroll.
Yes, very good. Of meeting William Knife Man. Okay, so I mean, I just kind of want to just kind of fixate on this the script page for just a second, because working well in the library, like people ask a lot about examples of, visions, hallucinations, fantasies, and how to kind of write that on the page. Is there anything you can tell us about kind of putting this down on the page and your thinking while you were doing that?
Yeah, I mean, like one of it was ripping off Rumblefish. When Matt Dillon floats up out of his body. And it was like, and I live in Tulsa. We shot this in Okmulgee and in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And, I was trying to reference, S.E. Hinton and Francis Ford Coppola's film that was shot here. And so, we took a look at those, and it was like, how do we, I think it's about entering the space. Like, how do you enter the space? And we just wrote it as that. And also, I mean, it's a comedy. So you have someone talking about being at the Battle of Little Bighorn and getting squashed by his horse. And I mean, nothing's expected. And yet, and he's talking about his nipples being hard, like it's cold in the spirit world, it's like, we chose the humorous route, I think, of the spirit realm. And then everything else is like about directing, I think. Yeah.
Sure.
My nipples are always hard. I'm always hungry. So
yeah. Since this has become like a big tenet of this discussion, I want to ask you, Sterlin, how do you have a philosophy for naming characters? Because Willie, Jack, and Cheese, and they're just like great names.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of feel like it's like The Sopranos, like a Native community. We have so many nicknames, and like. A lot of some of them are descriptive, some not. I grew up with a Cheese. We just called. No one knows why we called him Cheese. And then like William Knife Man. Like I wanted something that sounded old and native that you would sort of find, but like also very not. And so it's like William Knife, like how did he get the name William? Like, couldn't it have been cooler, And I feel like that character is he feels like a disappointment. I mean, he was at the ultimate battle of natives versus, the US cavalry, where we won, and he dies before it gets started. So I think his whole character is about sort of being a disappointment and like not being the coolest native that walks in the room. And so, if you were blessed with the name Knife Man, but then somehow got William tacked onto it, it's just a disappointment, So like, couldn't it have been like Crazy Knife Man or like something like that, So I think that everything feeds that character, right? Like he's sort of this disappointment, but in the disappointment, I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, as a child growing up, the only examples that we had of historic examples were these larger than life characters that were native, and like these warriors that were like fighting. It's like, well, what about the regular person that I can relate to that fucked up, once, and like his horse didn't, it's like that's what I think we all relate to in life, and I think the audience relates to that. So it was like trying to find that instead of like the larger than life warriors that's hard to relate to.
How's it
It's
going?
going good. How are you doing?
How's it going?
I found some new Star Wars.
He's really into Star Wars and Boba Fett right now. So
Awesome. Okay, so I've got one last question for you. The show, it just seems like it too is a trove of very specific funny characters, and it just seems like you delight in writing all of them, but is there any one particular character on the show who you find especially fun to write?
I mean, the character Willie Jack is so fun, and she gets to like, and she was written as a male character, but one of the best things about, I think, what we do is meeting an actor that changes everything, and she came in and she auditioned, and she was better than anything I could have ever written. Just her attitude, her swagger, her humor. She sort of personifies Native humor. And we changed the gender and just said, we're casting a female in this role now, and catered it to her. And I don't know, she has this like great blend of like, you kind of like one of those actors you just love watching do something, but also can like fade into the background and throw a joke in from the other side of the court, and like still shine, I don't know. It's like an amazing quality that she has. And then, you have these legends like writing for like Wes Studi and writing for Zahn McClarnon or writing for Gary Farmer. These people that like, like in the case of Zahn, in the case of Wes, I mean, all they get to do is play killers or like warriors, and they're in the 1800s. I mean, like they hardly ever exist outside the 1800s. I mean, like Wes Studi and Heat, but like it's so hard to see them as anything else. And I knew them personally, so I was like, I always knew like I'm gonna write them a comedy. Like they're so funny. And so doing that for them and letting people see how funny they are was the treat of the whole show. And then, Gary Farmer is this legendary actor from Dead Man, Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man, and also like all the way back to Powell Highway. So if you're Native, you watch Powell Highway, and it was one of the first contemporary Native movies. It was in the 80s. And just to watch that, and Gary's in that, and he's just a legend and underutilized. And so to be able to like give them these parts and let them be funny, which is, I think, like, I think that's what's wrong with every depiction of Native Americans in history of cinema, is that they miss the humor. Like, we didn't survive because we were sad and stoic. Like, we survived because we could laugh through all the crazy shit that was thrown at us. And that's how that is the essence of who we are. And so I just feel lucky. It was going to happen inevitably. I was just the lucky one that got to do it, for television first. So I don't know. I'm excited. It's been a crazy.
It's the humor that resonates, man. Congrats.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so let's jump to the next pilot, which is The Wonder Years with Saladin. We got those script pages. Well, we can talk a little bit. I have a note here specifically to cue the pages. So let's start with like a contextual question. So can you tell us about the genesis of this show? Like, I want to know where the idea for doing another Wonder Years came from and how you started on it.
So the idea actually came, I give Lee Daniels all the credit for having the vision of wanting to tell a story about the middle class Black experience during the Civil Rights Movement, because we've seen tons of great stories about the Black experience and the Civil Rights Movement, but rarely, if any, have been from the point of view of what middle class Black America was experiencing. It's usually about the struggle and things like that, which are very powerful stories and valid stories. And Lee got the rights. He got the rights to the original Wonder Years because the Wonder Years was such a great show that captured what was going on for a certain section of America during that time period. Okay, and I think Lee had the vision to see, okay, well, if I have that title, I can then show a different experience. But he did not want to be the one to tell that experience. He's been very vocal that he didn't feel like he had the story to tell. And so when he approached me to see if I wanted to take a crack at it, the first thing I said was no. I was a huge fan of the original Wonder Years, and I did not want to be the person who was known for creating the Black Wonder Years or for messing up the legacy of the original Wonder Years. But then when I sat and spoke with him and shared with him the sorts of stories I did want to tell about, the Black experience and growing up and things, I realized that he also didn't want to just do the Black Wonder Years. He didn't want to just do a version of it. And so when we approached 20th, my condition for even coming in was saying, I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. My family is a little bit unique for that time. My mom at that time, in the late 60s, early 70s, was a Black woman who had a master's degree, and found herself overeducated, underemployed. My dad was a musician that was in the group that split up, and the split that he did not stay with joined with this other group and said, let's call ourselves the Commodores. And my dad did not have that fate. And so he had a unique experience in that time as well in terms of culture and things. And so I was like, if you allow me I can wrap my head around what a reimagining of the Wonder Years can be if you allow me to approach it as its own unique animal. Just like Black Panther is a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's his own mythology, his own characters with their own agency. And so they were thankfully on board with that, and then ABC then also saw that vision, and I've always insisted on referring to it as a reimagining and not a reboot, not a remake. And so, our biggest challenge has been to get over people's expectations that it's going to be similar or the same to the other slew of reboots and remakes that have become, common in the past few years. So that's how it came to me. And, I would not have been able to do it without being able to really make it something that's very personal and unique. But still, again, I love the original Wonder Years, and clearly we are benefiting from the understanding of the tone that you get with the Wonder Years title. And we are certainly emulating that tone and that grounded nature of humor and sadness and bittersweetness and, and drama, all the realities and truth of life. Not trying to distance myself from that, but still make it his own thing.
Sure. Did you find yourself writing, when you were writing this pilot, looking at that, Neil Marlin's Carol Black pilot at all? What was your relationship with that?
So I certainly did, and I've been trying to have my cake and eat it too this whole time. Like I said, I want to distance myself from the original, but also embrace the things about the original that are great. So I watched it a lot because I wanted to make sure that the story that I was telling was going to be unique and, in and of itself to my personal experience, but also to the 12-year-old coming of age experience of someone who would have been growing up at that time. But at the same time, watching it so much, I found myself also saying, well, they made a great choice there. It's going to be hard to find a choice better than that, but let me make that choice my own, in terms of the, meeting the unrequited love, in terms of, setting up the family, setting up the feeling of being an other, not other racially, but being an other when you're 12, because every 12-year-old when he goes through that adolescent experience, feels like he's an other. So I certainly was influenced by it, and it's kind of it was a tricky dance to make sure that I wasn't just copying, but also realizing the things that they did quite well.
Sure. Well, yeah, the thing when you say that, the thing that kind of comes to mind is like right at the end of the pilot, you kind of expect that he's gonna have a kiss with Kisa, but it's like it's yeah.
Exactly, and that was one where again, that was me leaning into my own personal experiences and really wanting to set this show apart from how we will describe hope and how we will describe those universally relatable experiences of adolescence that motivate you to go forward. Because it's a Black family in the late 60s, I really wanted the 12-year-old protagonist to have an experience in the 12-year-old world with things that matter to a 12-year-old. My best friend, my first crush, my mom and dad, baseball. I wanted those 12-year-old experiences for that young Black boy to then be how he processes the very serious things that were going on in the adult world. And so by showing that heartache that a 12-year-old can understand, that we then see the character now begin to process the heartache he sees America having, in the wake of Dr. King's assassination.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at these pages. And the first thing I just want to note is this music cue right here at the top. And I mean, Wonder Years is obviously known for having a super nostalgic kind of soundtrack. And I'm wondering, when you're writing this, what are you listening to music? How do you decide, what cues to kind of put in the script?
So music was a very present part of the process of me writing this pilot. But, if I have to be honest, it was not the music that showed up on the screen. It was music that was instrumental in my adolescence. So it was really music from the early 70s. There's a lot of Stevie Wonder and things like that. And, each moment where you see a music cue, I had a music cue there, but it was one that would help me tap into the personal experiences that I had that I was trying to translate to the page. But we are blessed. I say we, me and Fred Savage, who is my producing partner in this, who I could not do this without. The first hire we made was our music supervisor. Burt Blackerack is his performing name, but Amani Smith is his name, and he is just a treasure trove of knowledge. Because, as you said, the original was known for his music, and one thing I insisted on, and I gotta say, it was one of the things that I'm most proud of actually holding the line on, was I did not want to use the original theme song, and I did not want to use any of the original music, not because there was anything wrong with it, but I wanted our musical personality and musical fingerprint to be true to this family and what would have been important to them. And so when we had our early meetings, I was like, I know you guys are going to want to hear Marvin Gaye's What's Going On and, things like that. And not saying that we won't use those music cues, but I really want to use the B-side of those very well-known tracks from the 60s, because I kind of want the music to be a character, but our family is a regular family, and I think the B-side tracks feel regular to those other tracks, but have the same great musical signature though.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about this scene.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to share this particular scene with us?
For a few reasons. It's probably the funniest sequence in the pilot, so I certainly wanted to lean into it for that. But also, I knew I would get a chance to talk about it in the context of what happens after this scene. What happened before it, and the heart of this show for me was, again, showing very universally relatable experiences, coming of age experiences, nostalgia in terms of what it was like when you're 12 and you're right on the cusp of, your dad's larger than life, everything in the world is cut or dry, right or wrong, and the reality and the complicated nature of life is just starting to bleed in through your personal experiences. Okay, and that's where our character is straddling. And so this scene represents, the main character Dean, kind of sees himself as the great uniter. He's a member of the first generation in Alabama of desegregated classrooms. And he has white friends and Black friends. They all play baseball, but they don't play together. And so the plot is he spearheads this first ever baseball game of his league, playing a team against his best friend who's white, his league. And so and he accomplishes that, you know, and it's a great thing. But he thinks that the complication of that is when his dad and his coach, who have a rivalry, start arguing and embarrasses him on the field. And that's just a very relatable moment, you know, for a 12-year-old. Your parents embarrassing you. Baseball is Americana. I think adults can relate to being those overbearing parents, and kids can relate to being embarrassed by it. And it's very, you know, and I do think the actors did a great job. It's very funny. But the purpose of this scene was to disarm the audience, you know, because you're like, okay, this is the complication that's going to go on, you know, this is this great thing he accomplished, but this is how they undercut it. And then what actually interrupts this back and forth in this conflict is someone bringing them the news that Dr. King was assassinated. And I really wanted the audience to feel disarmed because Black people at the time did not know they were experiencing history. And so part of that Black experience at the time, similar to other experiences as well, but part of that Black experience at the time was your everyday life could be interrupted at any moment by something that is tragic and has at its cause and root and heart tragic just because of the color of your skin, you know. And so this scene being so light and kind of frivolous and silly, I mean, you know, silly for grown people to be arguing about a little kid in baseball, really sets up the gut punch of, oh my goodness, our whole lives have changed in terms of what we thought this country was. And it's something that, again, the 12-year-old doesn't process immediately. And it's just setting up his journey of how he will then start to understand that, like I said, the reality of the adult world bleeding into these 12-year-old issues.
Well said. Thanks, thanks, Saladin. Before I let you go, though, I just want to point out I'm from Birmingham,
Okay.
so I
nice.
appreciate that. I caught just like the little subtle things, like the quick reference to Parisians.
Right. Yeah.
So kudos on that. I really enjoyed this pilot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk now to Lee Sung Jin about Enlightened Dave. Can you talk to us about where the idea for this episode came from and the motivation for doing it?
Truthfully, the idea, I think it was early on in the writer's room, and Jeff and Dave and Saladin, actually part of our panel here, show running last season, asked us all to kind of email ideas in. And I had just watched the Showtime documentary Shangri-La about Rick Rubin, and I, laughed throughout because, a ridiculous man. And but a legend. Don't want to besmirch him. I emailed kind of this idea of Dave getting set up with him to kind of work through some of his writer's block. Thought that would be a funny pairing, and we kind of developed it from there, and it went through a lot of iterations and trying to find what the core of this episode is. But it just kind of came from me watching a Rick Rubin doc.
Got it. So there's so much going on in this episode on like a subconscious level. And I'm curious how you found the beats of the story and kind of landed on the different stages of Dave facing himself and his own ego.
This one was a hard one because it involved, like, it's kind of very much a departure for the show. The show doesn't do like fantasy sequences or hallucinations or anything. I know there was a great debate in the room. And we actually split into a smaller room when we were trying to figure out where this is all going. And the co-writer of this episode, Luvh Rakhe, who couldn't be here tonight, but he just pitched this really insane idea of Dave meeting himself, and it's like a bald, hairless man. And I can't speak for Luvh as to why he said that out loud, but it made us laugh quite hard. And Dave, a lot of the room is just trying to make Dave Bird laugh. You know, and it's in Zoom, which is always tough. But I mean, Dave does this really high pitched laugh, like there's like a pleasant one, and there's like a one that's like 3 octaves higher. If you hit that, it's probably going in the show, and it did. So here we are.
So did you, aside from watching the Rick Rubin documentary, did you do any additional kind of research on how he works or Shangri-La?
Oh yeah, we delved deep. Had a couple contacts who have worked with him in the past, and you know, there's a lot of people had told us that he notoriously like doesn't show up for sessions. And again, don't want to besmirch him. Obviously, it's led to a lot of great music that I love. But I thought that was so funny that like the idea of someone's like, what they're really good at is like not showing up and let the artists do their own thing. And so we actually thought about, there were a couple of iterations of this episode where like we were trying to get Rick Rubin. And we were using like all sorts of like, I was like texting everyone I know in the music industry, trying to like get a hold of Rick Rubin. And eventually we actually, I think, got a hold of his manager, and like no one knew where he was. Like he was just like MIA for a couple months. So then we had to pivot. And so then we really leaned into the idea of him not showing up. And then it was a little difficult because we didn't know how to end it. But then I think, I forget how we came up with that ending, but it might have come in the writing. But that kind of reveal at the very end was sort of meant to be, I know Dave Bird really wanted to have like an Inception type ending. Dave loves speaking in references, usually mostly Nolan films. And so we try to capture that kind of Inception, like the top spinning, and you don't really know whether this is surreal or not.
Got it. And with all the sort of like Rick stand-ins, since, I mean, I'm asking everybody about this because names have become like a thing in this panel. But where do you come up with names like Biff Whiff and Atom?
Well, Biff Whiff is the actor's real name. And I mean, we spent a day on that. Just like, I don't even remember how Biff Whiff entered our radar. It was a breakout room on Zoom. I think Dave had been sent by casting potential stand-in for Rick, and we clicked on his IMDb, and it said Biff Whiff, and you know he can't pass that up, and so we just wrote that into the show that Biff was playing himself, and for some reason he's paid to hang out at Shangri-La to just kind of be Rick, because Rick's too busy. And Biff, honestly, Biff Whiff crushed it. Like Biff does not whiff. He was so good.
Can't find that on Name Dice either.
Yeah. Name Dice like crashes when it.
Okay, so looking at this little sample that we have here with the pages, and Kat, can I get another like elegant scroll here? Just so we can see a little bit of the description. At the very beginning of this script, I love that you have a note that says everything about this episode feels Kubrick-esque. And it seems like the description, like when I was reading the script, I was like, I wanted to read it in this like slow and meditative voice. And can you talk about how you and Luvh kind of like wrote the description? I guess that's my question, like how you kind of like came on that style.
Yeah, well, that was just purely, again, Dave Bird really loves talking in references. We text a lot of screenshots and stills of movies to each other, and also you know, I don't think I say this to Dave's face, but you know, he has like the filmic knowledge of like a freshman in college. And so we're like, have you heard of Stanley Kubrick? and then like we'll send him some screenshots, and then he'll really fall in love with, like, I mean, of course, like, you'll fall in love with, like, like the greatest cinema filmmaker of all time. And then he'll just start, like, really, like, leaning into it, just like saying Kubrickian a lot, just in, like, conversation. And then we'll be like, Dave, have you, like, watched any of have you seen 2001? Or, like, he's like, oh, no, not yet. So he'll just, like, start, like, he'll hear a word and he'll just start saying Kubrickian for about a month. And so that's how this this episode kind of became that.
Got it. And finally, the scene that we're looking at here, why this scene? Why did you choose this one?
I mean, seeing Dave in that kind of bald version of himself, you know, it's the money shot. And we didn't even know how that would look until we were, like, on set, and way more horrifying and just creepy than we had intended. And even the way he performed it, I don't think anyone was expecting that. I don't even think he was expecting that. And it's just, I mean, to Dave's credit, he really went for it. It's very, you know, a risky thing for him to try, because it's so not what he does on the show normally. And he just nailed it. It was amazing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, this was a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So next up, let's talk to Tony McNamara about Alone at Last from The Great. Thanks for waiting, Tony.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's great to listen to everyone.
So I don't know if you remember this, Tony, but way back at the beginning of the pandemic, back at like the beginning of 2020, we talked about research. Remember, we did a little panel with Davi Waller.
Oh,
and, yeah. So The Great is based on an occasionally true story. And so my first question for you is, when you're breaking this show in its second season, what period of history are you covering, and where do ideas for episodes come from?
I guess they come, I mean, I have an arc for her, I guess, that I kind of know. And I have some stuff that she did that I know I'm going to do. I'm just not going to do it the way it happened, or chronologically at all correctly. So it's really like, I mean, I can't, like, it's very character driven, and we have it's got a political element, the show, obviously. So it comes from there, really. What's the politics? She takes over the country in the second season. So that just suggested it's about, you know, she thinks it's going to be hard to overthrow him. And then that turned out to be the easy bit. And the hard bit is actually going to be running the country and having him a prisoner in the palace at the same time while they're having a baby together. So that all seemed like we'd probably get some story out of that.
For sure. So where did the idea for this episode specifically come from?
It was kind of well, curiously enough, it sort of had a different episode 3, and then the COVID thing kind of like, I couldn't do it. We just couldn't production do it. So then very quickly I kind of went, we need not a bottle episode, because I was incapable of that kind of conceptual thought. So, but I saw some kind of something like that was smaller. And then I love character-driven stories. And I did think rhythmically we'd had a really big sort of epic 1 and 2. And I was like, it'd be great to just focus on Nick and Al, and just what's happened to them is he lost his kingdom. She took hers over. It cost her a lot. And I was like, let's just have an episode about that, you know, and actually have quite a small story where he gets locked in his apartment, and she's sort of on a bit of a manic, because she's sort of so angry about what it's cost her. And that the first big thing that happens in her new kingdom is that he fucking stabs someone for calling him a name. And so I was just like, well, let's just sit with that and not run too much narrative for a change. Let's just kind of try and just stick with them and see what happens, you know.
Mm-hmm. And this this scene that we're looking at here occurs like pretty much at the beginning of the script. It's after he's stabbed someone for calling him said name. Why did you choose this scene as kind of being representative of the episode?
Oh, I think because it kicked off the episode, and it's a scene where you see the dynamic between Peter and Catherine, which is the sort of dynamic the show's is sort of built on, particularly in this season. And it was kind of like their new relationship and how that would be. And then I kind of love that Al's like different because she's so sort of manically angry, and Nick's so good at like clearly not able to read the room for a while. So I kind of liked, and I like that it becomes, it's funny, and then she sort of shocks everyone because she's suddenly violent for the first time in the show. So yeah, all those reasons, I guess. And it was fun. It's fun to watch them do it.
And I mean, we can see here just like on the page, there's the thing that I really love about this show is there's, with the dialogue and the characters, there's just so many characters of varying intelligence, varying degrees of intelligence, varying degrees of temperament. And it results in this kind of like crackle and pop. I just wonder, when you're writing a scene like this, what's kind of going through your head?
Oh, I'm very basics driven. I'm very like, what do they want? And then I'm very like, what are the other? We have a big ensemble of, I think, 13 regulars. So I'm always trying to serve them as well. So it's also like, what's happening to the others and how do we feed that in without losing the rhythm of Peter and Catherine? So I think in those terms, I'm just keeping it pretty basic, but very aware of always bringing in the ensemble as much as I can, because I know they drive story for us. And if they all have a rich story, even if they don't get heaps of screen time, you give Georgina, everyone had to have a reaction to what had happened because it was very unexpected from her. So and that had to have a ripple effect in the episode because it sort of makes, Georgina leave. And so I guess that it's, because of the nature of our ensemble, I'm always trying to like keep our main two fast and furious, but always aware that we've got this great sort of rich ensemble that bring a real texture to the show and are brilliant actors. So, I'm always like aware of these great actors that I've got on set going, and I, can give them anything and they can do it. And sometimes I'm a bit like, I don't give you enough, so yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you what I asked Sterlin, like, just amongst this giant, ensemble of like great characters, is there any particular one that is, a special joy to write?
I think my wife's in the show, so it's a special joy to write for her. So. So yes, Aunt Elizabeth is, so we've obviously started in theatre together and spent a long time, and she's been in lots of different things, and so it's nice to write for her because we're, it's great to do this show and be in it together.
And on the flip side of that, what's kind of your the biggest challenge for you in doing this like sprawling?
The biggest challenge, I think it's actually, I love writing. So the writing of it's the fun bit for me. The actual physical producing of the show is the day-to-day 5 to 9 waving at your children occasionally. That's the hard bit of the show. And the writing of the show and the room and all of that, the creative element and working with all these talented people, that never stops being a joy. It's more like, all the day-to-day problem solving and all that kind of gets a bit annoying at times, but yeah. For sure. Well, cool. I love this show too. I love all these shows. It's like, I could talk to all of you guys for like an hour. But I think, thanks, Tony. That was, no problem.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
And so let's close it out now with Jonathan and Gabe and Justin and the series finale of Superstore. So my first question for you guys is, Superstore is notable for being a show that did not shy away from addressing COVID and the pandemic. And so my first question is, did you always know you were going to focus on Cloud9 becoming a fulfillment center in the final season? And how did you kind of land on that?
I feel like Gabe and Jonathan, you're better equipped to answer that one.
Yeah.
They had taken it over and I'd left before the end, so.
We initially found out midway through the season that it would be our final season. So we didn't know that going in, but we thought we were working toward an end of season development that, yes, that the store actually became like a hybrid, like part fulfillment center, part store, and actually Glenn would be managing the store part and Dina would be managing the fulfillment center. And the next season, the theoretical season 7 would focus on that split, and we thought that would give us funny, story tension and seeing their different management styles and things like that. Once we found out that this would be the last season, we had already put down a lot of tracks heading toward the fulfillment center and things that we liked that would pay off, and so that we decided to just go all in and go toward that. And it seemed like it reflected, unfortunately, some of the reality of corporate America making decisions that don't necessarily take into account what, the deciding factor is not what's going to be best for the lives of retail workers and low-wage workers, and sometimes their collateral damage. And so, that was part of it. And Jonathan, is there anything else?
Oh, I think that's pretty much it.
Cool. So talk about how this final episode crystallized for you. Were you inspired by any other series finales?
Yeah, I think it's undeniable. I mean, 6 Feet Under, we were always aware of, that had a very big, famous flash forward sort of montage at the end that you took away from it. I'm sure there have been a few others. Sorry, my wife is just signaling me that she's leaving. That I can't think of.
But she's leaving you?
She's leaving me. That's wow. How it happens.
You're taking it very well.
Harsh city out there. And really, it's like when I think back on that, we knew we had to nail that last montage. That's all I can remember of, and we knew that's what people would eventually take. So the whole episode was important, but we knew we were building to this once we decided that this was the way we wanted to go.
Yeah, and I think
go for it.
A big part of it too, with what Gabe was talking about, with it, making the decision to have the whole store turn into a fulfillment center and all these people are going to be losing their jobs. It's not exactly a fun, uplifting series finale, even though it feels, unfortunately, very true to life. So it was like, how do we, honor sort of the reality of it, but still show that our people are going to be okay? And this ending montage sort of gave us the chance to do that.
I think over the run too, we had a lot of bummer endings of a lot of episodes. On purpose. We didn't want to be a show that always had things work out. More often things don't. Most of our season finales, probably all of them, had some oh shit moment, and it felt like, yeah, we could do that here too, and be saying something about middle class and you never win and something important. But we felt like we should give our fans one really solid, happy out, and felt like we'd earned that.
Cool. So I'm always kind of curious about this with series finales. When you get to a point where you're closing out a show that's been on for 6 seasons, does the network kind of let you do carte blanche, whatever you want, or do you have to sell them on any part of it?
I feel like they were very cool throughout of it. I don't remember any interference. Do you guys?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think there were certain things maybe they wanted to be sure we addressed in a satisfying way. Jonah and Amy was probably a big one, but it's not like we wouldn't have addressed, their relationship in the finale. Yeah, Gabe, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say, yeah, I think they wanted to hear what our plan was, but I don't remember too much pushback or giving us guidelines that we had to follow. Yeah, so we got got some freedom.
Cool. So we've got the script pages up here, and this is the very last scene of the series here. And can you talk about choosing to end the show with Garrett's voiceover, and how did you know that you were going to end it just like this?
Well, we knew, we talked for a while about a flash forward and seeing where people wound up. And then at some point in the process, and that's something most of our episodes have take place in one day. So that already would have been breaking the rules a little bit. But, you know, with a finale, you can break the rules. I don't remember at what point we decided to go to this instead. But as for Garrett, I mean, the pilot of the show opens with a Garrett voiceover, and it's a little sort of philosophical, and he's talking about the American Superstore and work and stuff. And in my mind, sort of in the conception of the show, he was going to be this sort of somewhat philosophical narrator. I kept thinking of, I want to say his name was Chris from Northern Exposure, who was on the radio, or no, that's the actor's name. Anyway, whatever that guy was. And he did that in the second episode too. We kind of abandoned that, but it felt like coming into this, that would be a nice bookend. There's a number of bookends in this episode. So him being the one to kind of like sum up the theme of the show, that it's, you know, it's about finding those moments of fulfillment in the day-to-day drudgery, felt, once we landed on it, it sort of felt right.
Yeah, and there was a point, you know, we had written a lot of possibilities for like what the script was up to this point. A lot of scenes came in and out, and throughout the whole thing, it sort of felt like, just to give credit where credit's due, Justin was the one who came up with this idea for this Garrett announcement and ending it this way. And it always felt to me like no matter which pieces came in and out and what we ended up with in the final product, like we were going to land it okay because we had this at the end. So it was just sort of like, once we heard that idea, it just seemed sort of perfect for ending the show.
Well, and I think it's so cool that you guys got nominated for this award for your very, very last episode. So the thing that I kind of wanted to close on with you all, can you tell us what, I mean, you had a show, it ran for 6 seasons. What are you proudest of? A joke, a moment, a character? What's your favorite thing that you personally
Wow, that's not hard. I mean, there's a lot of little parts. There's a number of episodes that felt a little risky along the way that I wasn't sure if we'd be able to pull off, to be allowed to do, that we ended up doing. You know, we didn't set out to do a show dealing with social issues especially, but I think when we did tackle those, we did it in a way that felt not important at all, because you never want to do that, but good and kind of different and interesting. I don't know. It feels like, yeah, we didn't get nominated for a hell of a lot of awards in the run. This may have been the first one ever, I want to say. But yeah, it feels like maybe more and more people are finding it now, and I'm proud of the legacy of it, guys.
I was just going to mention like how deep our bench was with the cast, and that was something that I feel like we were, you know, I'm sort of proud of the way that we spotted someone who maybe just had a one-line part in an episode, and we're like, oh, we want to know more about that character, and we were able to, you know, part of it is the way the show worked. It enabled us to have all these employee characters who could come and go. And just being able to like find Sandra was the big one, Kaliko Kohai, who was there for just one part, or, you know, a few lines in one episode. And then we were like, oh, we want to do more with her. But there were a lot of characters like that, where by the end of the series, we ended up with this huge cast who, you know, we could just mix and match in different stories, but we could count on all of them to just really deliver. And yeah, I'm glad we had the opportunity to do that.
Gabe's got nothing.
Yeah,
I got nothing.
Gabe's just a guy. He's there for a paycheck.
I just phoned it in.
Really? Nothing else? That's it? Okay. Yep.
No, I mean, I'm proud of a lot of what we did on the show, but yeah, no, it was a great experience. I'm no particular moment or scene or anything. I did love the interstitials, the small moments that we would use as scene transitions that were just sort of observed moments of customer or employee behavior. And I think for a lot of people that became that was one of their favorite parts of the show. And I think it was a great idea that Justin had to kind of create our own language. And it was, it was tricky to do those, but it was fun. And I think it brought a lot to it.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have one, since you guys are all still here, thank you for sticking with us through this whole thing. We have 1 minute left, and I think this is a really good question from the audience to end this on. Kat, you can just let's everyone's faces again. So this is a question from Anne, and I think before we all go back to our lives, if a really quick, like 1 or 2 word answer, what helps you get better and improve at writing comedy? It doesn't have to be 1 or 2 words. It can be like a sentence.
What helps you get better at writing comedy?
Yeah. Or you know what? What helps you get good? What helped you get good?
I don't even need words. I will just say this. I will just do this. And it was something that Steve gave me to do for this. And I thought, well, this is the reason why I feel I get better.
I think for me it was keeping working on the comedy just as hard as you work on everything else. Like it's a technique. It's something you learn and practice and fail at over and over and over. And I realized I was learning it a long time after I learned it, so it's like stand-up comedy. You get up and you fail and you get back up. I think that's what I did.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. I'll say, early on in my career, I was proud to be known as a good joke writer. And that's something I work hard at, but I've actually gotten better at writing comedy when I've stopped writing jokes. Just mining real moments and really finding the humor in the reality and the groundedness of the moment, basically.
Yeah, this is sort of piggybacking on that, but writing comedy based in character and not, it's been said before, but if you could give a joke in your script to take it from one character and give it to another character and it still works, maybe that means that's not a great character specific joke. So yeah, I think the best comedy comes out of character.
And comedy is quite subjective. And so I think something that's helped me, is just really not trying to mimic as much and trying to figure out what your own gut instinct is. Because I think we all start sort of mimicking. I remember going to general meetings when I started and they'd ask you what's your favorite comedy? And I'd lie. I'd say Caddyshack just because everyone else said it. But it's not. I think it's it's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird when you start doing comedy for a while. I feel like it becomes almost like this language, that if you don't want to try that hard, you could sit down and kind of get through a script real fast, and it becomes this almost like it's like a rhythm, and you could get through a bunch of mediocre jokes without even thinking that hard. And then you keep, pushing yourself now and then and trying to do things that surprise you a little bit, and not being afraid to fail a little bit too is important. That's the thing that'll elevate it. You have to have a bunch of flops and a bunch of people say that was not funny at all, or else you're just doing the bare minimum, the mediocre comedy that I think we're all trying not to do.
Yeah, I think live audiences are sometimes really good as you start too, like stand up or I did a lot of plays And I do remember very clearly sitting with 400 or 500 people not laughing at your joke. It really makes you work out why that didn't work, or, you really get a sense of rhythm and what an audience, how they read something, how they get permission to laugh, how they understand something. So I do think that kind of stuff is good.
For sure.
Also the other thing is just sitting around, like, I think the only thing that made me better was telling stories from when I was a very young age around the table. And, I always found the stories that I was drawn to observationally just were in the more uncomfortable moments. And, what the funeral thing that happened when you shouldn't be laughing and then that happened. That's the thing that, like, sort of, if you go to those uncomfortable spaces, that's usually the place that feels most leveling for the human experience to me.
I see tons of nodding as you said that. Yeah. Well, if Gabe has nothing else to add,
We have a whole funeral episode next season, so yes.
Hey,
Nice.
That's a human.
yeah.
I'll be there.
Any final thoughts before we went a few minutes over, but this was so good. I can't thank you guys enough. I learned so much. Congrats on your nominations. And I'll just, Jonathan, Gabe, Justin, Steve, John, Sterlin, Sunny, Tony, and Saladin, thank you. And thanks to our partners on this event, Final Draft and Variety. This round of applause is for you. On my end, live long and prosper. End of episode. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Congrats, everybody.
Congrats, everybody.